Now, about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly they saw 2 men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep. But since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my Son, my chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one any of the things they had seen.
Now, Jenny, I believe that you, on your many travels, have been on a mountain. Can you explain what it was like in those mountains?
Yes, I was fortunate to visit one of the 2 mountains, something in Palestine, where it was thought the Transfiguration took place, and one of them is called Mount Tabor, and it's a real pudding basin of a mountain, but it's very steep. It arises up off the plain, and it's got a very windy road up it, and you couldn't drive the tourist bus up, so we actually went up by taxi, but they drove like I don't know what around all these blind corners, and there were a lot of local people too. Hang gliding was one of those really it's just such a wonderful place to hang glide from, so I always have this image of hang gliding at the Transfiguration, which seems a bit funny, but what a hugely powerful story. And I'm always intrigued by all this stuff about glory, and so often nowadays I'm interested. We've had the Sevens on, and got all these people going around in wonderful costumes, and then all these TV programs we've got now about the sort of New Zealand's Got Talent, and I mean they used to talk about 15 minutes of fame, but I think it's sort of 5 minutes of glory, and everything we say up on the internet. It's but this is quite different, isn't it?
It is, and this story is grounding us, isn't it? Yeah. It's not just 5 minutes of fame. There's a whole lot, a lot longer.
Yes,
know the glory of God.
And I love. I mean, I've always loved this sort of Peter trying to hang on to that, and it's a very natural. Human, I mean, this awesome vision, and amazing seeing Moses and Elijah as well.
Isn't it? Yes.
But it's sort of like that, we want to sort of hang on and just sort of remain in that space. It sort of makes me think of going back to school after January. We've had a lovely time in Christmas in January, and now what it's like when you sort of come back from holiday and have to get back to work and have to get back to school, and you sort of feel like you're winding down,
and it's the glory is just like being on the mountaintop for a couple of seconds, whereas this is a lot longer, isn't it?
Yes, and I think we also, it's interesting that when they do get this sort of cloud, and you can think of, when, we probably all know what it's like when you've been tramping or walking or something, and then suddenly the fog, or some of these sea fogs we've been having come in, and it's interesting they get the word terror and awe, and it was an awesome thing. It wasn't just it was magnificent, but there was also something about this is something pretty awesome, and that's sort of to grasp that as well, and also that this was somewhere where Jesus was praying. It was
that's right. Yeah. And I think what I've liked about this was that they heard a voice that said, "This is my Son, my chosen. Listen to him."
Yes.
So it's a bit more than the baptism where it was "You are my Son." That was to Jesus. This here is "Listen to him." So it's for us.
So it's sort of like moving on, isn't it? So first of all it was especially for Jesus, and now it's like we've got this, Jesus is being revealed in his glory, and the disciples are called to listen, and we know and ourselves how often they didn't seem to get it. You know, they had, like us, I suppose, we need to hear something 5 times before we begin to get it. And we too are beginning to get that sort of shadow side of, you know, they're talking, Jesus and Moses and Elijah are talking about Jesus' departure, and that something's going to happen in Jerusalem. And we know sort of from the stage, Jesus takes them down the mountain, back into the valley, and he starts, you know, they're starting to head towards Jerusalem, and
of course that's where his betrayal and rejection and crucifixion comes from, isn't it?
So we can understand why God's saying you've got to listen to the hard stuff as well, and it's not easy, is it?
No, we all like to hear the good stuff and perhaps not cope with the hard.
But I like the way that Jesus is still carrying on with his disciples, that they're there as the community, because I mean sometimes when the message gets a bit harder, we need our community around us to support us.
We do.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good message as we journey on in Lent together.
Okay.